So, we've seen a whole bunch of stuff about Lightwave's IK solver, the different stuff you can do with it, the different numbers of items and goals and all of that, and the different settings. The last couple of bits to cover we have already seen but haven't really talked about, and that's the fact that IK is available on more than just rotation channels. We can see that it's an available option here both on positional channels and also of course on scaling channels. The behaviours that we get when using it for either scaling or position are pretty much the same as we saw for rotation. So here I've got a pair of bones. Let's set their Z scale to say inverse kinematics. Of course this last item is going for the goal object here, and what we see when we pull on it is that the bones stretch away just like this. Now, what we see when using scaling like this for IK is that we get the effects of parent space scaling. So of course this first bone here has scaled down to 0.7 odd times its size, and this bone down to 0.6 odd, but it is smaller than it ought to be because of course it is getting pre-scaled by its parent here. And we can of course see that the end bone in this chain, which has no scaling whatsoever, is stretching and smushing when we pull the chain like this. This of course is an entirely predictable behaviour. It's not something that you would find yourself going all over the place and why is this going up and how much should that go down. But it's not a particularly useful one in an awful lot of situations because you want the scaling to be standard on a piece by piece basis. Of course we can tweak things in a chain like this using the stiffness setting, which is also available for scale, and that lets us sort of balance the overall behaviour of the chain. But again, it is somewhat imperfect in a way, and all I've effectively done here by turning up the stiffness so high is effectively prevented this bone from getting any stretch. You see here it's at 0.997, its normal scale, and so the scale that we're seeing is really just inherited scale from its parent. As such, the most common and useful use for this kind of IK scaling is just to have it on a single item. So here I've got it now just on this one bone. That first one there has been set back to keyframes, and we can see that when I drag the goal, just this one bone there performs a little stretchy stretch. If I give it a target item, say to the goal as well, then of course we can drag the goal not just in the one direction, but drag it all around, all over the place, making the bone stretch and scale around to where we want it. The bone is of course still only scaling down its Z-axis here, as we can plainly see, but by rotating to point at the goal, it keeps it always in line with the direction of scaling. And this is useful when we want to do little bits of stretchy things for bits of tendons or muscle or elastic setups on stuff. And in such a situation, this bone would be skinned to our mesh, and the end bone here, which of course is still inheriting scale from that one, would usually be turned off or have its strength set to 0 to be ineffective. So let's lose all of that and go and take a look at position here and set these guys to IK. Again, here I'm doing it just on the Z-axis for the time being, and we can see that when we move the goal, the bones come apart in this fashion, basically moving along to fill out the space in between. We can see that they're both perfectly equal, the amounts that they're getting here. This has moved out 457 odd millimeters. This started at 1 meter away from its parent's pivot point, so that's also moved 457 odd millimeters. And we can easily tweak that by using the stiffness on either one of these two guys to make one have more pull than the other. So this is a nice, easy, predictable system to work with. Of course, we can also go and start adding on other channels if we want. Unlike rotational IK, positional or scale-based IK can operate much more easily on multiple axes, letting us do clever little tricks and bits and pieces like this, for instance. It is also the case that when trying to do stretchy IK setups, it is more usual to use this positional method, as you normally have a couple of different items that wish to stretch out. You'll notice I can, for instance, even take the last item here that's reaching for the goal and set its Z position to IK, and that creates a further offset between the two things, whilst of course always keeping this last item in point with the goal there. The reason that this is more useful for doing stretchy IK setups on limbs where you do have multiple bones in a chain that want to pull away and stretch out is because of the inherited scale issue. Using IK scaling for stretchy IK setups of course just gives you more and more scaling further down the chain, which is usually an undesirable result. We can see a nice simple example of this if I turn our second bone here on its pitch to give it a bit of pre-bend, and I set both it and its parent to have IK on pitch there, then what we can see is that we're getting both a rotational and a stretchy sort of effect. Of course, you'll notice that the bones are coming back and overlapping one another. But if, say, I kill off the positional IK for this first item and I set some motion limits onto these ones, so I give it a minimum of 1, which is of course its starting position, and just however high I want to go, let's say 100, and I'll do the same over on this guy here, then what we see we can very easily get is a chain that behaves in this sort of a manner, acting like a normal limb within a given range, and then of course stretching out and away as it comes further from its reach. So there we have it, the full story of IK in Lightwave and how the solver works, how you can mix things up between the different control methods that are available.